The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson, a first chapter Friday read aloud video with the Word Nerd. Today, as you listen, play along. Watch for the story quote that will appear on screen. Write it down, word by word, and then follow the instructions given to you by your teacher. Hey teachers, check the links in the description box for some student engagement worksheets to use with these videos. Help your students focus and zone in rather than zone out. One last thing before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Mullins' sixth graders at St. Clair Middle School in St. Clair, Michigan. I'm so glad you guys are here today. Happy reading and happy holidays.
Hi, my name is Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week I'm going to be reading to you from The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson. This book is a classic. It has been made into movies. It has been made into a play. I've experienced it so many ways, but today we're going to experience it as a story. In case you've never heard of this story before, it did come out a very long time ago, so it's okay. It's okay if you haven't, but I'm going to read you the back so you know what it's about, and then I'll read you chapter 1. The Herdmans are the worst kids in the history of the world. Not like even just in the school. They said in the worst kids in the history of the world. Okay, that's where we're starting this story. They lie, they steal, they smoke cigars, they swear, and they hit little kids. So no one is prepared when this outlaw family invades church one Sunday and decides to take over the annual Christmas pageant. None of the Herdmans has ever heard the Christmas story before. Their interpretation of the tale, the wise men are a bunch of dirty spies and Herod needs a good beating, has a lot of people up in arms. But it will make this year's pageant the most unusual one anyone has seen and just possibly the best one ever. This story is funny and it makes my heart happy, and I think that you're going to love it. It's a very short book. You could probably read it, in just a couple settings. Let me see here. It's only 108 pages, so real quick. Chapter 1 doesn't have a title. It's just got a number 1, and we're gonna dive right in. The Herdmans were absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world. They lied and stole and smoked cigars, even the girls, and talked dirty and hit little kids and cussed their teachers and took the name of the Lord in vain and set fire to Fred Shoemaker's old broken down tool house. The tool house burned right down to the ground, and I think that surprised the Herdmans. They set fire to things all the time, but that was the first time they managed to burn down a whole building. I guess it was an accident. I don't suppose they woke up that morning and said to one another, "Let's go burn down Fred Shoemaker's tool house." But maybe they did. After all, it was a Saturday and not much was going on. It was a terrific fire. 2 engines and 2 police cars and all the volunteer firemen and 5 dozen donuts showed up from the Tasty Lunch Diner. The donuts were supposed to be for the firemen, but by the time they got the fire out, the donuts were all gone. The Herdmans got them. What they couldn't eat, they stuffed in their pockets and down the front of their shirts. You could actually see the donuts all around Ollie Herdman's middle. I couldn't understand why the Herdmans were hanging around the scene of their crime. Everybody knew the whole thing was their fault, and you'd think they'd have the brains to get out of sight. One fireman even collared Claude Herdman and said, "Did you kids start this fire smoking cigars in that tool house?" But Claude just said, "We weren't smoking cigars." And they weren't. They were playing with Leroy Herdman's young Einstein chemistry set, which he stole from the hardware store, and that was how they started the fire. Leroy said so. "We mixed all the little powders together," he said, "and poured lighter fluid on them and set fire to the lighter fluid. We wanted to see if the chemistry set was any good." Any other kid, even a mean kid, would have been a little bit worried if he stole a $4.95 worth of something and then burned down a building with it. But Leroy was just mad because the chemistry set got burned up along with everything else before he had a chance to make 2 other bombs. The fire chief got us all together. There were 15 or 20 kids standing around watching the fire and gave us a little talk about playing with matches and gasoline and dangerous things like that. "I don't know. I don't say that what's happened here," he told us. "I mean to say I don't know what happened here, but that could have been it. And you see the result, so let this be a good lesson, boys and girls." Of course, it was a great lesson to the Herdmans. They learned that wherever there's fire, there will be free donuts sooner or later. I guess things would have been different if they'd burned down, say, the Second Presbyterian Church instead of the tool house, but the tool house was about to fall down anyway. All the neighbors had pestered Mr. Shoemaker to do something about it because it looked so awful and was sure to bring rats, so Everybody said the fire was a blessing in disguise, and even Mr. Shoemaker said it was a relief. My father said it was the only good thing the Herdmans ever did, and if they'd known it was a good thing, they wouldn't have done it at all. They would have set fire to something else. Or somebody. They were just so all around awful you could hardly believe they were real. Ralph, Imogene, Leroy, Claude, Ollie, and Gladys. 6 skinny, stringy-haired kids, all alike except for being different sizes and having different black and blue places where they had clonked each other. They lived over a garage at the bottom of Sprawl Hill. Nobody used the garage anymore, but the Herdmans used to bang the door up and down just as fast as they could to try to squash one another beneath it. That was their idea of a game. Where other people had grass in their front yard, the Herdmans had rocks. And where other people had hydrangea bushes, the Herdmans had poison ivy. There was also a sign in the yard that said, "Beware of the cat." New kids always laughed about it till they got a look at the cat. It was the meanest looking animal I ever saw. It had one short leg and one broken tail and one missing eye, and the mailman wouldn't even deliver anything to the Herdmans because of it. "I don't think it's a regular cat at all," the mailman told my father. "I think those kids went up in the hills and they caught themselves a bobcat." "Oh, I don't think you can tame a wild bobcat," my father said. "I'm sure you can't," the mailman agreed. "They'd never try to tame it. They'd just try to make it wilder than it was to begin with." If that was their plan, it worked. The cat would attack anything it could see out of its one eye. One day Claude Herdman emptied the whole first grade in 3 minutes flat when he took the cat to show and tell. He didn't feed it for 2 days, so it was already mad, and then he carried it to school in a box. And when he opened the box, the cat shot out straight up into the air, people said. It came down on top of the blackboard ledge and clawed 4 big long scratches all the way down the blackboard, and then just tore around all over the place, scratching little kids and shedding fur and scattering books and paper everywhere. The teacher, Miss Bandel, yelled for everybody to run out in the hall, and then she pulled a coat over her head and grabbed a broom and tried to corner the cat. But of course, she couldn't see with the coat over her head, so she just ran up and down the aisles hollering, "Here, kitty, kitty," and smacking the broom down wherever the cat hissed back. She knocked over the Happy Family dollhouse and the globe of the world and broke the aquarium full of 20 gallons of water and about 65 goldfish. All the time she kept yelling for Claude to come and catch his cat, but Claude had gone out in the hall with the rest of the class. Later, when Miss Brandel was slapping band-aids on everyone who could show her any blood, she asked Claude why in the world he didn't come and get his cat under control. "You told us to go out in the hall," Claude said, just as if you were an ordinary kind of first grader who did whatever teachers asked. The cat settled down a little bit once it got something to eat, most of the goldfish, and Ramona Billion's 2 pet mice that she brought to show and tell. Ramona cried and carried on, and she said, I can't even bury them. And then they sent her home. The room was a wreck, broken glass and papers and books and puddles of water and dead goldfish everywhere. Miss Bandel was sort of a wreck too, and most of the first graders were hysterical, so somebody took them outdoors and let them have recess for the rest of the day. Claude took the cat home, and after that there was a rule that you couldn't bring anything alive to show and tell. The Herdmans moved from grade to grade through the Woodrow Wilson School like the South American fish that strip your bones clean in 3 minutes flat, which is just about what they did to one teacher right after another. But they never got kept back a grade. When it was time for Claude Herdman to pass to the second grade, he didn't know his ABCs or his numbers or his colors or his shapes or the 3 bears or how to get along with anybody. But Miss Bandel passed him anyway. For one thing, she knew she'd have Ollie Herdman next year. That was the thing about the Herdmans. There was always another one coming along, and no teacher was crazy enough to let herself in for 2 of them at once. I was always in the same grade with Imogene Herdman, and what I did was to stay out of her way. It wasn't easy to stay out of her way. You couldn't do it if you were very pretty, or very ugly, or very smart, or very dumb, or had anything unusual about you like red hair or double-jointed thumbs. But if you were sort of a medium kid like me and kept your mouth shut when the teacher said, "Who can name all 50 states?" you had a pretty good chance to stay clear of Imogene. As far as anyone could tell, Imogene was just like the rest of the Herdmans. She never learned anything either except dirty words and secrets about everybody. Twice a year we had to go to the health room to get weighed and measured, and Imogene always managed to find out exactly what everybody weighed. Sometimes she would hang around waiting for the nurse, Miss Hemphill, to give her a Band-Aid. Sometimes she would sneak behind the curtain where she kept the folding cot and just stay there the whole time with one eye on the scales. Why are you still here, Imogene? Miss Hemphill asked one day. You can go back to your room. I think you better look and see if I've got what Ollie has. What does Ollie have? Imogene shrugged. We don't know. Red spots. All over. Miss Hemphill looked at her. What did the doctor say? We didn't have a doctor. Imogene began scrunching her back up and down against the medicine cabinet. Well, does Ollie have a fever? Is he in bed? No, he's in the first grade. Right now? Miss Hemphill stared. Why, he shouldn't be in school with red spots. It could be measles or chicken pox or any number of things. Any number of contagious things. Imogene, what are you doing? Scratching my back, Imogene said. Boy, do I itch. The rest of you boys and girls go back to your classroom, Miss Hemphill said. And Imogene, you stay right here. So we all went back to our room, and Miss Hemphill went to the first grade to look at Ollie, and Imogene stayed in the health room and copied down everybody's weight for Miss Hemphill's records. Your weight was supposed to be a big secret, like what you got on your report card. It's nobody's business what you get on your report card, all the teachers said. Miss Hemphill said the same thing. It's nobody's business what you weigh. Not even the fat kids could find out what they weighed, but Imogene always knew. Don't let Albert Pelfrey on the swing, she would yell at recess. He'll bust it. Albert Pelfrey weighs 143 pounds. Last time he weighed 137, so right away, everybody knew two things about Albert. We knew exactly how much he weighed, and we also knew that he was weighing more all the time. You have to go to fat camp this summer, Imogene hollered at him. Miss Hemphill wrote it down on your paper. Fat camp is a place where they feed you lettuce and grapefruit and cottage cheese and eggs for a month, and you either give up and cheat or you give up and get skinny. Just a little side note here, friends. This book was written a real long time ago. We don't talk like this anymore or make people feel bad about themselves. Part of it is why Imogene is such a worst kid in the history of the world kind of kid, but please just know we are not unkind like that anymore. And sometimes books written a real long time ago, they didn't know that. But we do, and we're nice to our friends. I am not, Albert said. I'm going to Disneyland with my Uncle Frank. That's what you think, Imogene told him. Albert had to believe her. She always was right about things like that, so all year he had fat camp to look forward to instead of Disneyland. Sometimes Imogene would blackmail the kids if they had anything she wanted, like Wanda Pierce's charm bracelet. Wanda Pierce weighed about a ton. She even had fat eyes, and her hobby was this charm bracelet. It had 22 charms, and everyone did something a little special. The wheels turned, or the little bitty piano keys went plink, or the little tiny drawers opened and closed. Besides being a fat kid, Wanda also was a rich kid, so every time you turned around, she had a new charm. Look at my new charm, she would say. It costs $6.95 without the tax. It's a bird, and when you push this little knob, its wings flutter. It costs $6.95. They were great charms, but everybody got sick of hearing about them, so it was almost a relief when Imogene blackmailed her out of it. I know how much you weigh, Wanda, Imogene told her. I wrote it down on this piece of paper, see? It must have been an awful amount because even Wanda looked horrified. So Imogene got her charm bracelet, and she got Lucille Golden's imitation alligator pocketbook with Souvenir of Florida written on it. For a while, she got 10 cents a week from Floyd Brush till Floyd caught the double pneumonia and lost 15 pounds and didn't care anymore. My friend Alice Wendelken was so nasty clean that she had detergent hands by the time she was 4 years old. Just the same, Alice picked up a case of head lice when she was at summer camp, and somehow Imogene found out about that. She would sneak up on Alice at recess and yell, "Cooties!" and smack Alice's head. She nearly knocked Alice cross-eyed before one of the teachers saw her and took them both to the principal. Now what's all this about? The principal wanted to know, but Alice wouldn't say. I had to hit her, Imogene told him. She's got cooties. I saw one crawling around in her hair, and I didn't want them on me. You did not see one, Alice said. I don't have them anymore. What do you mean you don't have them anymore? The principal asked. Did you have them lately? It really shook him up. He didn't want a whole school full of kids with cooties, so he sent Alice to the health room, and the nurse went through her head with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass, and finally said she was clean and it was all right. But it was too late. Everybody called her Alice Cooties the rest of the whole year. If Imogene didn't know a secret about a person, she would make one up. She would catch you in the girls' room or out in the hall and whisper, I know what you did. And then you'd go crazy trying to figure out what it was you did that Imogene knew about. It was no good trying to get secrets on the Herdmans. Everybody already knew all the awful things that they did. You couldn't even tease them about their parents or holler your father's in jail because they didn't care. Actually, they didn't know what their father was, or where he was, or anything about him, because when Gladys was 2 years old, he climbed on a railroad train and disappeared. And nobody blamed him. My mother's friend, Miss Phillips. Oh, now and then you'd see Miss Herdman walking the cat on a length of chain around the block, but she worked double shifts at the shoe factory and she wasn't home much. My mother's friend, Miss Phillips, was a social service worker and she tried to get some welfare money for the Herdmans, so Mrs. Herdman could just work one shift and spend more time with her children, but Mrs. Herdman wouldn't do it. She liked work, she said. It's not the work, Miss Phillips told my mother, and it's not the money. It's just that she'd rather be at the shoe factory than shut up at home with that crowd of kids. She sighed. Can't say I blame her. So the Herdmans pretty much looked after themselves. Rolf looked after Imogene, and Imogene looked after Leroy, and Leroy looked after Claude, and so on down the line. The Herdmans were like most big families, the big ones that taught the little ones everything they knew. And the proof of that was that the meanest Herdman of all was Gladys, the youngest. We figured they were headed straight for hell by the way of the state penitentiary until they got themselves mixed up with the church and my mother and our Christmas pageant. And if you want to know what happens next to the Herdmans and the rest of this town and this Christmas pageant, you absolutely have to get a copy of this book. It is the perfect one to read at Christmas time. And you know all the places you can get it. You can get it from your school library. You can purchase it from your favorite local indie bookstore. And if you can't find it those places, you can get it via the link in the description box. I will leave it there for you. Remember, I've got worksheets to go with all my books too. And that's what I've got for you this week. Merry Christmas, friends. Happy reading, and I will see you again next time.
To continue reading the hilarious adventures in the Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday playlist. I've got over 153 years worth of Fridays waiting for you there. This week's mystery manuscript quote says, since Gladys was the only one in the pageant who had anything to say, she made the most of it. Thanks so much for visiting my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you come back again. Please like this video, subscribe, and you can find more great content from me at these places. Happy reading!